Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I am a food truck business coach and author of Food Truck 101, Beginner to Winner. This podcast is all about helping you start and grow your food truck business. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different than I normally do, and I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of different topics that I want you guys just to think about. And I'm going to do this in a way that I call You Might Be a Hobbyist. If you guys have ever listened to Jeff Foxworthy, you've heard his You Might Be a Redneck If stories. So this is kind of along that similar vein. A hobby is defined as a regular activity that's done for enjoyment, typically during one's leisure time, not professionally and not for pay. Does that sound familiar? Most people vend in their off time from their other careers, and a lot of people claim to not make any money or to never have paid themselves, which kind of makes them amateurs, because, amateurs don't get paid to do things, but professionals do. Typically, a hobbyist pours money into their favorite pastime. So you're kind of getting the picture there. So let's decide, which one are you? Are you a hobbyist or a business person? So if you can kind of imagine Jeff Foxworthy standing on the stage, let's go with, if you don't pay yourself regularly, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't know all your expenses down to the penny, you might be a hobbyist. If you close whenever you feel like it, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't have written recipes and assembly standards for your products, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't have a predetermined budget for every single business expense you have, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't count your inventory on a regular basis, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't figure a P&L statement on a regular basis, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't use a POS system that's sophisticated enough to track sales and inventory, you might be a hobbyist. If you regularly put your personal money back into the business to keep it afloat, you might be a hobbyist. If you avoid events because the fees are just too high, you might be a hobbyist. If your first move in getting into the food industry is to buy equipment and then figure out how to use it, you might be a hobbyist. If you think all you need is one more good recipe to get more sales, you might be a hobbyist. If your business can't survive 2 weeks of bad weather, you might be a hobbyist. If your excuse for slow service is, we cooked to order, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't ask every single guest for feedback and reviews, you might be a hobbyist. If you've told more than one guest in your career to go to McDonald's or this ain't Burger King, you might be a hobbyist. If you covered burnt food with more cheese and went ahead and sent it out, you might be a hobbyist. If you reduced your condiment portion towards the end of a day just so you don't have to refill a bottle, you might be a hobbyist. If you continue to take orders while your cooking staff is in the weeds, you might be a hobbyist. If your average wait time doubles your average cook time, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't know your average wait time, you might be a hobbyist. If you have a staff and you don't inspect what you expect, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't keep a daily record of temperatures for your equipment and your food, you might be a hobbyist. If you think all you need is liability insurance and that's the only one you need, you might be a hobbyist. If you choose price over quality, you might be a hobbyist. If you believe 3 times cost yields enough profit after all the other expenses, you might be a hobbyist. If you just lump expenses together and call it overhead, you might be a hobbyist. If you use retail terms rather than restaurant terms, you might be a hobbyist. If you think paying workers as a contract laborer, that's a 1099, is legal, you might be a hobbyist. If you haven't paid yourself back every single penny of startup money you put into your business at the beginning, you might be a hobbyist. If you think that opening up with no marketing plan will just bring hungry people, you might be a hobbyist. If you think you serve customers and not guests, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't know where your exact break-even point is for the day, the week, the month, and the year, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't know how many guests it takes to achieve your daily sales goal, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't have a daily sales goal in the first place that covers that day's full expenses, you might be a hobbyist. If you think coins as giving back change slows down your speed of service, you might be a hobbyist. If you only claim credit card sales but not your cash sales for tax purposes, you might be a hobbyist. If you say no to an event or a location or a catering or a private gig without doing the math first, you might be a hobbyist. If you have zero cash in reserve generated by your business for your business, you might be a hobbyist. If you're not food manager certified and your staff is not food handler certified, whether your state requires it or not, you might be a hobbyist. If you hire people and don't train them on how you want things done, you might be a hobbyist. If you say cash is king and refuse to accept credit cards, you might be a hobbyist. If you're charging service fees on credit cards, you might be a hobbyist. If you don't have a loyalty program in place, you might be a hobbyist. If you run a cash discount scheme, you might be a hobbyist. If you think food cost is the same amount as the total money you spent on buying your inventory, you might be a hobbyist. If your food business is not where you want it to be and you don't seek experienced professional help, you definitely have a hobby. So all of those little statements I just made, I want you guys to think about. Replay them again and listen to them. How many of those apply to you? How many of those do you recognize as, oh, this might be an opportunity for me to get better at my business? I'm not trying to put anybody down. If you do a lot of those things, you now have something to work on and a goal to aspire to get better in your business. All those things can be done by a properly ran business. All of those things add up to having a very profitable business. But as you listen to the list and say, no, I don't want to do that. No, I do that, but I don't care. You're chipping away at your own profitability. You just go ahead and take a few dollars out of your wallet and throw them into the wind because that's what you're doing. You're not taking the opportunities to improve your business. And if you don't improve your business, then honestly, all you do have is a very expensive hobby. Thank you guys so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you find the information helpful in your business, please become a monthly supporter of the podcast. Just hit the support button or follow the link in the description. Every little bit does help keep us going. Join our Facebook group. It's called Food Truck Training. We got a whole bunch of awesome people at all different levels, from just starting to decades-old veterans. They've all got your back when it comes to helping you and your food truck business grow. And again, thank you so much for listening. Come back tomorrow because I have a whole bunch more to say about helping you and your food truck business grow.